asking, what is a night of Alley? Will it be funny? Will it be serious? Who is Alley? Someone famous I should know? Well, the answer to all of that is yes. To get more specific, I am Alley. And I wanted this to be a day of Alley, but the sun said that 2 stars that bright couldn't be out at the same time. On February 12th, 2002, I was conceived. Probably. As this is roughly 9 months before my birth and the day of my parents' 2nd wedding anniversary. But that's not where Alley began. For Alley is an idea. Alley is not just my name, not just the space between 2 buildings, not just someone who really likes gay people. It's actually an acronym. It stands for Animalistic Lusting for Large-Scale Yearning. And this is a night of me. Alley's alleys. Is that clear? No? You'll catch on. You see, I've experienced a lot of Alley throughout my life. I've always been an Alley. A lot of my life can be defined by the obsessions I've had, the alleys, a very Alley thing to do. For the building bricks of me, Alley is made up of many more alleys. Without alleys, there is no Alley. So this is a night of Alley, and we're gonna mosey on down my alleys of alleys. Are you ready?
Yeah!
Starting off. Now, alleys are quite a universal experience. We all experience alleys, especially in our early life. Whether it be Sesame Street, princesses, hibachi cooking, we all have things that we love. But I don't consider these my first real alleys, as they were not born from my own fruition. They weren't alleys. No, so when I think about my first alley, I think of none other than wildlife conservationist and TV personality, Jeff Corwin. When I asked my parents what things were that I was obsessed with as a child, Jeff Corwin was my dad's immediate and only answer. I discovered Jeff Corwin through the timeless childhood tradition of watching TV on Saturday mornings while my parents tried to grip on to some semblance of rest. He had a show called Ocean Mysteries that aired at 9 a.m. on ABC, and from that first viewing, I was hooked. I needed to consume all of his media, including his first TV show called The Jeff Corwin Experience, which I watched on my first generation Kindle Fire. We here at A Night of Alley would like to make it very clear that this is a pro-Kindle Fire show. Along with watching his show, I had all of his books, including his memoir, a children's fiction series, and a non-fiction book about conservation called 100 Heartbeats, which I still haven't read, so you'll need to give that back. I loved him so much, I dressed up for him as my school's career day. I made a DIY snake catching stick. I was so convinced I was gonna be a zoologist and a TV personality just like him. My obsession grew to the fact that one day I Googled his address and wrote him a piece of adoring fan mail in the hopes he'd write me back. He never did. And that's something my mom still holds a grudge about. When I think of my love of Jeff Corwin, I think of pure childlike wonder and love and innocence. Maybe that's because it centers around my innate curiosity and love of learning and something educational, or maybe because it's the last thing I really loved that I didn't read a fan fiction for. Who knows? YouTube things. I believe that we as Gen Z were blessed as a generation for coming up at a time when YouTube was at its prime, and I embraced this early teens YouTube sphere with my whole chest. There was a period of time where the 2014 YouTube Rewind was my favorite video on the entire planet. I used to rewatch it and yell out the names of all the creators I knew, which was most of them. I didn't have a limit to who I followed. O2L, Tyler Oakley.
Monkey covering eyes. Thanks.
Jenna Marbles. Yes! I would religiously watch all of their content, and they had a pretty measurable impact on my life. I mean, Rhett and Link, sorry Liz, are still one of the reasons that I got into comedy. I formed a parasocial relationship with all these guys, and they became my friends in a period where I didn't feel like I had many, #middle school. And since everyone is experiencing this, knowing about YouTube and YouTube culture gave me a little bit of information I could use as cultural capital at the Young Life gatherings I went to looking for friends. But this experience of trying to use my knowledge of YouTubers was the first time I realized I loved things a bit harder than everyone else. Because you see, when I would pull out that deep lore that Connor Franta was actually a championship swimmer in high school, I was greeted with uncomfortable laughter instead of conversation. So despite the fact that it seemed like everyone had YouTubers they loved, I just seemed to love mine a little bit more, and no one really understood that. Thoughts about these creators filled my head. I would imagine what would happen if Kian Lawley walked into the marble slab I was at. I regularly stalked their Instagrams, getting back to those sepia-soaked posts. I mean, I even made my own Tyler Oakley merch. Hand ironed. One time, my mom even confronted me about tweeting at these YouTubers in all caps because she said it would scare them away. Whatever. I read fan fiction about these YouTubers, and it was the first time on my fan fiction journey where I discovered original characters and self-inserts. All of these fics were mostly just harmless romance or really gruesome accidents, you know, standard middle grade reading. But this is actually how I discovered smut. It was on accident, but I have a distinct memory of being in my driveway and reading a Casper Lee self-insert and having a penis described very, very poorly. Nevertheless, YouTube was a big alley for me, and I still have a shelf in my childhood bedroom with all of the books that I got. Now, this alley overlapped with one of my most iconic alleys, which is... the Australian not a boy band, 5 Seconds of Summer. I discovered 5 Sauce while I was in a hammock of the Joneses, a family friend's house, just dicking around on Wattpad. I just finished a Shawn Mendes fic when I stumbled upon a fanfiction called Adopted by 5 Sauce by Cuddle Me Callum. I began reading and I was intrigued. Who is this 5 Sauce? And coincidentally, when I got home, I realized I had a $10 iTunes gift card just burning a hole in my pocket. Now, I consider the use of this $10 iTunes gift card to be one of the most important decisions of my life. Like, this made me believe in the butterfly effect. Because, unlike what you might be thinking, I didn't immediately run home and buy the 5 Sauce debut self-titled album. No. Because at the same time, I was really into a song called Somebody to You by the Vamps. That's created a situation in where I had 2 self-titled debut albums and only 1 iTunes gift card. So, I did what what any reasonable and self-respecting person would do, and I listened to every single 30-second snippet for both albums. When I went through the vamps, I felt fine. And when I first listened to Five Sauce, that's how I felt too. Until I got to a song called Don't Stop. I heard the first sounds of Don't Stop and thought, now this? Yeah. This is music. I finished listening and ran to my dad, had him type in our Apple ID, and I bought that self-titled Five Sauce debut album immediately, and thus began my commitment to the sauce. Now, as I said, I considered this decision to be one of my most important choices I've ever made, and that's because I found Five Sauce while experiencing my first major, and I mean major depressive episode. And like, not to be cheesy or anything, but Five Sauce low-key gave me something to live for. I dedicated my life to them. They gave me something to care about when I had a hard time caring about anything. And as you can see here, they actually made up most of my wardrobe. I would walk around with the logo drawn on my wrist, and with Ashton Irwin, that's the drummer, name written on an arrow heart on my thigh. You know, like the song. I was reading fan fiction for them at Well, and you know, this stage of fan fiction is definitely one that I believe gave me a pretty high amount of brain damage, but I can now say I read much better Five Sauce fan fiction. And because, as I established, I can love things just a little, I spread my love of Five Sauce to those around me. It allowed me to grow close to the girls on my summer league swim team, which gave me a group of friends when I really needed one. We even formed our own parody Five Sauce band called 6 Hours of Fall. This was me. I was Ashton Irwin double, so Mont, Irwin Mont. We even had our own logo and everything. And you know, Five Sauce is also how I found my eventual middle school friend group, which, you know, had irrevocable impacts on me and who I am as a person, because, you know, #middle school. Now, speaking of middle school and insecurities, this alley is a little bit unlike all of the previous alleys we've done. And that's because this is my alley for skincare. Now, I have always had bad skin, and I don't mean acne. I mean literally any other serious skin condition you can have. I've had eczema, I've had staph, I've had molluscum, I've had impetigo. I have fucking impetigo right now. You know, my eczema used to be so bad that in middle school they would ask me if I had black eyes because it was so dark, and I had a friend's mom who would sneak photos of me while I was at their house because she was genuinely concerned for my well-being. So it was only inevitable that something I hyperfixated on would be my skin. But it wasn't the things my dermatologist was telling me, or even the stuff like this fucking shit that actually would help my skin that I was obsessed with. No, I didn't want to have to think about the reality of having chronic conditions for the largest organ on your body. I just wanted pretty skin because that's what 15-year-old girls want. And 15-year-old girls don't get pretty skin from steroid creams. They get it from DIY sugar masks and pretty pink face masks. That's Diet Coke. That was awesome. Now, at its peak, my skincare obsession, I was doing about 2 to 3 face masks a day, which is not good for your skin. But I did take selfies every time I did, where this is that beautiful collection is from. I was reading blogs. I was giving advice to my friends about their skin as if I knew anything. And you know, who's to say if this alley was really beneficial to me in the long run, but it did teach me that I don't have to wash my face every day. So I don't. Now, in a similar vein to our last alley, one of my most beneficial alleys to me in my personal life is my makeup alley. And no, it's not what you're thinking. I was not obsessed with like covering up my skin. I have much too sensitive skin for that. I was obsessed with makeup as a form of artistic expression. Makeup came into my life at a time when I felt like I couldn't really obsess over anything because I was at boarding school. So it gave me a nice little escape, a nice 30 minutes to an hour by myself where I could relax and use my body as a canvas. And I got really good. Like, I even made my own Instagram for it, which led my high school acting teacher to tell me I was obsessed with likes. But whatever. It also taught me one of my most valuable skills, which I still have to this day. If you know me, you might know that I'm often running a few minutes late. So my makeup alley has taught me that I can do a complete eye look in under 5 minutes. Which I will demonstrate for you now. If you thought any of my previous alleys were intense, nothing can compare you for my alley for Dan and Phil. This is one of my longest and strongest eras. For about 2 years, Dan and Phil were the primary thing that I thought about. It was a hyperfixation with a capital H. Shit is so good. I discovered Dan and Phil while watching the 2014 YouTube Rewind, and I thought Phil Lester just had an interesting face. So I found his channel, which led me to finding Dan's channel, which led me to finding their gaming channel, and it all just spiraled from there. I watched all their new videos, all their old videos. I bought their books, I bought their merch, I even saw them on tour. I did everything, and it was easy to, immerse yourself in Dan and Phil, because at the time, the fandom, spelled with a PH, was one of the most prominent on the internet. Now, my love of Dan and Phil is what introduced me to true internet culture and started my journey on how I use it today. It's the reason I got a Tumblr and a Twitter, and was the first time I really started producing content for something I'd loved in a long time. I remember one time I posted a GIF set to Tumblr, and after volleyball practice, I checked and it had 5,000 notes. And I felt so famous. My Dan and Phil alley is also where I discovered good fan fiction. Because as you may have heard, I was reading fan fiction for my previous alleys, but it was all terrible because it was on Wattpad. And Dan and Phil is what led me to the Tumblr to AO3 on the Wattpad to Tumblr to AO3 pipeline. She gets it. And I also discovered that Tumblr and AO3 were not blocked on my school computer. Which means I have many very vivid memories of sitting in my 8th grade science class, brightness on 0, slamming my laptop shut if anyone ever approached. My Dan and Phil era was visceral and intense, but it's one of the strongest times I ever felt like I was a part of a community bigger than myself. And, you know, it's the basis of a lot of the things I act and talk, but we're literally not gonna get into that right now. Along with Five Sauce, Dan and Phil is what introduced me to the pop punk sphere of culture, which led me to being emo. Being emo was my entire personality for most of middle school. Now, I never became fully emo, because my innate sparkle and shine could never be darkened enough. But God, did I try. Part of this was becoming a fan of the so-called emo trinity, Fall Out Boy, Panic! At the Disco, and My Chemical Romance. The emo quartet, if you add in 21 Pilots, which I did. And I was obsessed with listening to all of their music. I used to draw their logos on my body and on everything I own. To this day, I still have art hanging on my ceiling of a lot of these bands' logos written in black pen. And I still love these bands and a lot of these songs. Like, some of them are still on like my chill out playlist, like LA Devotee by Panic! At the Disco or Migraine by 21 Pilots. And no matter how cringe people might say, I still want a tattoo based on the Fall Out Boy lyric, as alone as a little white church in the middle of the desert getting burned, from their song Rat-a-tat-tat. I almost got it when I was in LA last month. Emo music helped me feel seen and comforted during a time I really needed that, but despite that, this alley had a lot of effects on me that weren't all positive. My participation in emo culture probably did give me a lot of brain damage. This was really a time I look back on and go, who let a 12-year-old have that much access to the internet? I literally sent in this photo and this paragraph to multiple Instagram accounts called Internet Friend Finders in the search of internet friends, and I did find one. Her name is Athea. I still follow her on Instagram. We were talked like every day for like a year, and I still sometimes think about, you know, reaching back out and seeing how she is, but on the flip side, I did have the hallmark experience of telling someone not to kill themselves on Snapchat. Yeah, you get it. But that was a girl from a Five Sauce group chat. So, anyway, despite the, brain damage this might have caused me, all of that emo music still bangs. So, now, in the exact opposite direction of brain damage, my next alley is on being a fucking nerd. I'm still not quite sure how this alley started. All I know is that one day I was just a normal kid, and the next I was sitting in my front yard watching videos about healthcare, and I had a real sustainable opinion on the American healthcare system and was asking all of my friends if they had gotten their HPV vaccine. Which, if you haven't, you should. 1 in 4 people will contract it in a lifetime, and it can lead to some serious cancer. So, as you can see, I was making memes about my love of healthcare, including this one, for the individual mandate when it was taken away. This obsession with healthcare led me to being a more informed person in general. This was my Vox era, my neo-lib era, my dweeb era, the era where I would come home and read studies from the Pew Research Center. I would wake up and read the New York Times morning briefing. I had concrete opinions on European politics. This was my academic era. And the reason why when I made merch my sophomore year of high school, half of it was the word actually with the alley in another color, because I was so often, actually correcting people. This is probably one of the hardest alleys for my friends, because I was really annoying. Because any smart aleck part of me was instantly bumped up to like 1,000. Now I am thankful for this alley, you know, it definitely made me smarter and allowed me to be like a more informed global citizen. And it's also the reason where if I had gone to school like literally almost anywhere besides DePaul, I would have double majored in like public health or something. But I'm at DePaul and I'm not doing that. So now I just have a bunch of information in my brain for a field that I don't study in. But at least I can make great conversation at adult dinner parties. Following the theme of loving something I don't do, freshman year is when I fell in love with ice skating. This happened on accident. One day I just was sitting in my living room as the 2016 Grand Prix final was playing. I got invested in the routines, wrote down a list of skaters, and started to follow the sport. This decision led to one of the most stressful nights of my life. The 2018 American Men's National Championships. This was the national deciding the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic team. There were 20 men fighting for 3 spots and 3 alternates. Now, for some background. The main yearly figure skating competitions are put in by the International Skating Union, the Grand Prix. This is 6 events and 1 Grand Prix final. And coming out of the 2017 Grand Prix series, 7 men who qualified, the 7 men who qualified in the series from America, 3 American men figure skaters were Nathan Chen, Adam Rippon, and Jason Brown. All of which I loved. And all of which finished in the top 6 in the Grand Prix final and in the top 10 for points overall for the season. So they were really good. Now this informs us going into the 2018 Men's American Nationals because everyone thought the Olympic team was set. We have these 3 guys. And during the short program, that's how it looked. We had Nathan Chen at number 1, Adam Rippon at number 2, Jason Brown at number 3. But then we get to the free program. Jason Brown goes, "This bitch is falling again and again." Adam Rippon goes, and it's the same thing. Then fucking underdog Ross Minor comes out, gives the best skate of his life to a Queen medley. I was sick to my stomach. What followed was 16 of the most stressful hours of my life as I awaited for the Olympic team announcement. I knew it was not possible for Adam and Jason to be full team members, but I held on hope that something would happen. And luckily, when the team was announced, it ended up being Nathan Chen, Vincent Zhou, and Adam Rippon as our main 3 skaters, with Ross Minor and Jason Brown as our alternates. I still think about this season a lot, including one of my favorite free skates, Adam Rippon's The Birds. Now, I cannot figure skate. But if I could, this is how I would imagine I would do that piece. Skate. Axel. Axel. Quads out. And spin. 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 Oh, spinning fast. We're skating. We're skating. Split jump. Axel. Axel again. Skating. Skating. We're gliding. Bird. Now, there is truly no other way that I can describe my sophomore year of high school, other than Peter Parker lived in my mind, rent-free. And not just any Peter Parker. Specifically, Britain's sweetheart and Zendaya's trophy husband, portrayed by the beautiful Tom Holland. Now, him being our specific Peter Parker, or PP, is important because the thing is, at this time, I'd only seen a couple of the Marvel movies. I'd seen the first Spider-Man, first Captain America, Infinity War, Black Panther, and Thor Ragnarok. A whopping 15. 5 out of 15. But the key movie out of this bunch was Infinity War, because spoiler alert! When I saw this little spider boy turn to dust in Tony Stark's arms, it was over for me. Because that's the thing is, I wasn't really a fan of the MCU. I was a fan of the MCFU. The Marvel Cinematic Fan Universe. I would go home from school, lay down in the dark with my noise-canceling headphones, and read Peter Parker and Tony Stark fanfiction. Not Peter Parker times Tony Stark fanfiction, Peter Parker and Tony Stark fanfiction. I was reading fics about the mentor-mentee relationship. I was reading about a pseudo-father and son, what it means to learn, love, and grieve with the ultimate found family, the Avengers. This is one of my softest alleys. But it's also one of the ones that truly represents my love of fan culture and for escapism through fan fiction. And why fan fiction is so big among neurodivergent people, because, you know, having to read something about something you already exist gets rid of the obstacles of having to learn about new people and allows for, quote, a steady stream of joyful moments, rewards, without costing too much of mental effort that is already in short supply, end quote. That is a quote from biggest-gaudiest-patronus on Tumblr. And this makes perfect sense, because my sophomore year of high school is also probably the most depressed I've ever been. So much so that my mom thought I had mono, and took me to the doctor, which led me to have a breakdown in my pediatrician's office. And the one real bright spot I had at that time was my little baby boy. And there's not much to say other than that. And you know, sometimes when you're at your lowest, reading a multi-work series about Peter Parker being addicted to heroin and going through the trials of recovery with the support of his father figure, Tony Stark, and the rest of his found family, the Avengers, gives you that, you know, reassurance that life is worth living and that you're too afraid to ask for it for yourself. Extraordinary. Also, if you may have noticed, I didn't do any, quote, tricks. And that's because when I say I was in my magic alley, what I really mean is cardistry, which is a form of extreme card manipulation, which is more about flourishes than sleight of hand, but the layman's term magic will suffice. I used to practice so much my hands would blister. Band-aided my fingers, it was awesome. To this day, I still keep a deck of cards in my backpack just in case. I wanna one of the most beneficial alleys for me in my personal life probably would be my alley for photography. This alley really came to fruition in the 8th grade. And I think it was inspired by my love of Connor Franta and early Conan Gray and the desire to become aesthetic. I did portraits of my friends mostly, and honestly, I still think a lot of these are pretty good. I even one time did this abstract photo shoot about the value of youth. They were all in primary colors and we shot it on a playground. As I said, this alley is one of my most beneficial to me in my real life. And I was able to reconnect with it this past year through my job as being a comedy arts student worker. And I got to photograph a ton of live shows, which was super awesome. So who would have believed that this 9th grade alley would lead to me making $15.40 an hour? Now, better every time. There are a lot of alleys that didn't have the same intensity and vigor that a lot of other alleys had. So I thought I would speed round a couple of them now in honorable mentions. Drary. If you've heard me talk about fan fiction at all in the past year, you've definitely heard me mention Drary because since my freshman year of college, they've been my go-to ship to read when I'm in between others. And since they're one of the most written about ships ever, there is no short supply of fics. And since we're all being vulnerable here at a night of alley, I have a secret to tell you all. I have never read any of the Harry Potter books or seen any of the movies. Everything I know about Harry Potter comes from Drary fanfiction, including full rewrites of the book series, which I have read. And if you're wondering, my favorite Drary trope is when Draco Malfoy in the Muggle world. And when I read Drary, I don't picture Daniel Radcliffe and Tom Felton. This is what Drary looks like to me. This exactly. Interview with a Vampire. On July 23rd, my life was changed forever. This is when I watched the pilot episode of Interview with a Vampire in throes of increasing wonder. Since then, I've seen this pilot 9 more times. And every time I watch it, it's with full 100% attention. I think it is perfect. I've also seen the rest of the season, and this series occupies a permanent part of my brain. There is no other show that has me this enraptured. I wrote a paper on this show. Diana the musical. There isn't much to say about Diana, other than the fact that I've written 4 papers on it and seen it 15 times. And it was a fucking dream ballet, guys. It's not hard to wrap your mind around. The Good Doctor. Senior year of high school, I was working my way through Noah Galvin's complete works, which included watching season 4 of The Good Doctor. Originally, I was only watching the scenes that he was in, but I got kind of interested in the other plots and decided to go back and start the entire series over, which led me to watching the whole thing in a matter of days and then watching it again. For about a month, The Good Doctor is all I thought about, and just in time for its season 4 mid-season premiere, I watched that first episode live, and then none of the rest. I don't know if it was because I got out of that binge haze and realized how fucking crazy that show is, but I haven't seen an episode since. The Magicians. Few pieces of media have had the same real, tangible effect on my mental health as the sci-fi show The Magicians. I found the show the same way anyone finds a show, by seeing GIF sets on Tumblr. And I fell in love with it. I watched the show, I read the books, it occupied my mind. Now there is a lot of lore I could get into to contextualize why this show had such an impact on my mental health. But all I'll say is that when the season 4 season finale aired, I cried for 2 hours. I was on a trip to New York and did not allow myself to think about it for the rest of the trip, because if I did, I would get in such a depression I wouldn't want to do anything. All of my close friends noticed a serious dip in my mental health, and when I moved into my dorm the next year, I was banned from watching it because they were afraid I would slip back into that mindset. One love Quelliot. They deserved better. Yeah. And if I ever meet showrunner John McNamara, I am punching him in the fucking face. Oh, I'm pissed about it. Living on the dance mound. Now, one of my most important and impactful alleys is Dance Moms, as it truly set the stage and the foundation for how I moved through all future alleys. This was the first alley of my real, true design and discovery. The first time I learned what it meant to be consumed by a piece of media. This alley is Dance Moms. Now, I don't remember how or why I started watching the show. I think it's because my best friend Grayson was watching it at the time. But boy, did I fall in love with it. I don't know if it was because I was the same age as all the girls and could self-insert and live my dream of being a child star, or if I just really loved the drama. But either way, Dance Moms was my life. My Dance Moms alley had irrevocable impacts on me in 2 big ways. The first is that Dance Moms was my first introduction to fan culture. I had an Instagram fan page, dance_art_124. It's still up if you want to look at it. Where I would make edits of the girls on Pixar. I thought they were really, really good. Also, Dance Moms is where I discovered fan fiction. First through Instagram accounts, which would post chapter by chapter in the captions, and the header was the same cover every time. And then through my accidental discovery of Wattpad while Googling Brook Island fics, which Then I would read these fan fictions on my bright blue first-generation iPod Touch. This is a formal apology to kindle fires everywhere. Sorry. I read hundreds of Dance Moms fan fictions, mostly about them being abused, getting cancer, or being in car accidents. But it was this foray into Wattpad that led me to reading other fics, which led me to things like Five Sauce. So in a way, it all comes back to those gruesome Dance Moms. But it wasn't just through fan culture that Dance Moms impacted me. It also ignited my love for dance. My best friend Grayson, my sister Hannah, and I used to do pretend dance competitions. My song was always Say Something by Great Big Worlds. Grayson's was Brave by Sarah Bareilles, and Hannah's was Let It Go from Frozen. Me and Grayson always got first or second place, and Hannah always got last because she has no sense of rhythm, and she still doesn't. Now, I had done dance before, what girl wasn't signed up for a ballet class? But it was my foray into Dance Moms that really allowed me to fall in love with it. And this hasn't faded. To quote Robert Pattinson, there's a ballerina inside me. Sometimes when I dance, it feels like what I was meant to do, and I followed that through doing things like taking tap classes or doing musical theater. But it's only really recently when I felt like I really reconnected with this love fully. During my winter quarter of freshman year of college, I took modern dance with Lynn Kahn. And shout out Lynn, she's great. And this is hands down one of the most impactful classes I took in college. Lynn truly reminded me why I love dance, and also that you can explore passions at any age and any point of time, because not to be cheesy or anything, but you're never too old to dance. Through Lynn's class, I started improvising. No, not that kind. In my free time, and it was through this that led me to signing up for adult dance classes. Now, I try as hard as I can, because sometimes being a comedy major means you're really busy, to get up to the studio that I really love, dance on Broadway, and take a class once or twice a week. The one I try my hardest to get to is called Contemporary Fusion, taught by the lovely David Ingram. And he, like Lynn, reminded me what it really means to love dance. I love these classes and being able to get out of my head and into my body, and also to hang out with a bunch of silly little millennials. Dance has become like therapy to me, and taking these classes has reminded me that I can do things creatively, not just for my future or for a show or for a professional reason like that. That being said, I am going to dance in this show right now, so.
Something I'm giving up on you. I'll be that one if you want me to. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'll be that one if you want me to.
Dance Moms was my first alley, but I just really started to reconnect with dance. In the past few months, I've kind of realized everything is circular. Like the resurgence of my Five Sauce alley, which began in the January of my freshman year of college, when I, on a whim, decided to watch the Five Sauce 10-year anniversary show, which is really good and you should all watch. This led me to my friendship with my lovely friend Catherine Courtney, and also the creation of my Stan Twitter. My Stan Twitter has brought me some of my best and closest friends and my most cherished memories. It's really hard to put into words how incredibly full circle re-falling in love with Five Sauce was. How one of my first big obsessions is one of the things that most recently took me out of a bad time. You know, I was struggling with being lonely, I had a fucking broken foot. It was my first Chicago winter. And through that, finding Five Sauce again felt like finding myself again. If you followed me on Instagram recently, you will have noticed the resurgence into my Dan and Phil era. And truly, these two British twinks will always have a grip on part of my brain. But like Five Sauce, there's something different about how I love them now versus how I loved them then. Maybe it's because we're both fully out and proud and living our most authentic lives, but I think it's more than that. That's why tonight's final alley is me loving my alleys. Now, I know I've spent the better part of the last hour with you discussing the things I love with my full chest, but I haven't always felt that way. For most of my life, it felt like I loved things too hard. I had the same interests as other people, but they meant more to me. And if I talked about them, no one would understand. But now, it doesn't feel like that. I can love these things and talk to people and they will understand, but even if they don't, I don't really care. Because, like the other day on my Instagram story, I said nothing is cringe if you're confident enough, and I truly live by that. The things I love are just as much a part of me as anything else I do or that defines me. My decision to love Dan and Phil has impacted me the same amount as my decision to pursue comedy. Loving Five Sauce has brought me the same kind of community that community theater did. Dance moms and dance got me into my body more than any other kind of physical activity. The posters I have on my wall, the merch I wear on my chest, the tattoos I have on my body, these things all represent the media I love, but they also represent my love for myself. Letting myself love things loudly is my self-care and my self-love. This night of alley has been a night of alleys, and that is the most alley of them all. This has been a night of alley. Thank you. I love you. Good night.